You're watching DD India Live. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Tensions run high at the Israel-Lebanon border on the 33rd day of the West Asian conflict. Netanyahu warns Hezbollah against joining forces with Hamas. The G7 presents a unified stance after Tokyo meeting, agrees to support humanitarian pauses in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
We all agreed that humanitarian pauses would advance key objectives: to protect Palestinian civilians, to increase the sustained flow of humanitarian assistance, to allow our citizens and foreign nationals to exit, and to facilitate the release of hostages.
Abortion rights advocates and Democrats score wins in U.S. elections, a sign that reproductive rights remain an issue ahead of the 2024 presidential race. And Paris hosts a global summit to discuss rapid deterioration of poles and glaciers. First up, the latest on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israeli airstrikes on the Gaza Strip are reported to have killed a Hamas weapons maker and other cadres. Now this as its air and ground offensive targets the Hamas's underground tunnel network. Gaza City, the Hamas's stronghold in the enclave, is encircled by the Israeli forces. The Israeli military says that troops have advanced into the heart of the densely populated city, while the Hamas says its fighters have inflicted heavy losses on the Israeli forces. Now, during a media briefing after the G7 meeting in Tokyo, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken expressed a collective desire to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but pointed out that a ceasefire will have dire consequences if the Hamas remains in power.
All of us want to end this conflict as soon as possible, and meanwhile, to minimize civilian suffering. But as I discussed with my G7 colleagues, those calling for an immediate ceasefire have an obligation to explain how to address the unacceptable result it would likely bring about. Hamas left in place with more than 200 hostages, with the capacity and stated intent to repeat October 7th again and again and again. Ultimately, the only way to ensure that this crisis never happens again is to begin setting the conditions for durable peace and security, and to frame our diplomatic efforts now with that in mind.
Now, it's been a month since the Hamas took 200-odd people captive. The Hamas has since released 5 hostages. Efforts are on to free the remaining hostages as well. The families of the hostages are holding a sit-in for demanding the release of their loved ones. DD India's Amritpal Singh spoke to the friends of certain hostages, and he filed this report from Hakiria in Tel Aviv. Take a look.
It's been more than a month since the horrendous attacks by Hamas took place on Israel. Hamas that day not only killed people, but took 242 of them hostages, many of them elderly, small children, people of all ages, even Israeli soldiers, and also many of them, more than half of them, according to the IDF estimates, foreign nationals. While efforts are on to get the hostages released, there are Qatar-based mediated negotiations happening, but without much success. Only 5 hostages have been released so far.
I'm scared because what we have in the school and in our home and with the people that we grew up with, it's not gonna be the same like it used to.
We are here to support the families, and we are here to tell people the stories of these people. We used to study with, we used to play with when we were kids. Her school kids from the class are now kidnapped in Gaza Strip and Gaza.
People are getting restive. There were protests outside Benjamin Netanyahu's homes, and their stories are really heart-wrenching. While they ask them to put the pressure on their government to get their loved ones back. Amritpal Singh for DD India in Hakiria, Tel Aviv.
Now, Jordan's ambassador to India, Mohammed Salim Jamil El-Qaed, says India as an emerging power can play a role in resolving the West Asia conflict. Take a listen.
India, as emerging power in the world now, India can play a role on that situation in order to solve the problem and to save the lives of people who are killed there.
UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, is visiting West Asia. The UN official will visit the Rafah border crossing point between Gaza and Egypt and then will travel to Jordan's capital, Amman, on Thursday. Earlier, during his Cairo visit, Turk said that a solution to end the West Asia conflict is important. The G7 has wrapped up 2 days of talks with a focus on reaffirmed support for Ukraine, calls for dialogue with China, and promises of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Japan's Foreign Minister Kamikawa Yoko said that it was the G7's first response to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
G7 members have agreed to unequivocally condemn the terrorist attack by Hamas and others, and secondly, to seek the immediate release of hostages. Thirdly, we have agreed that it's necessary to take urgent action to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the G7 nations agreed on humanitarian pauses since it will help achieve key objectives, including aid to Gaza and the release of the hostages.
The G7 ministers reaffirmed our staunch support for Israel's right and obligation to defend itself and seek to ensure the attacks of October 7th can never happen again in accordance with international humanitarian law. We had in-depth discussions about the steps that we are taking to address urgent needs on the ground. We all agreed that humanitarian pauses would advance key objectives: to protect Palestinian civilians, to increase the sustained flow of humanitarian assistance, to allow our citizens and foreign nationals to exit, and to facilitate the release of hostages.
Britain on Wednesday imposed sanctions on 29 individuals and entities in Russia's gold and oil sectors as it targets the Kremlin's finances supporting the war in Ukraine. Now, those sanctioned include a United Arab Emirates-based network, which Britain said was responsible for channeling more than $300 million in gold revenues to Russia. Britain also sanctioned two of Russia's largest gold producers, Nord Gold plc and Highland Gold Mining Limited, as well as oligarchs Vladislav Sviblov and Konstantin Strukov. Take a look at some more stories making news around the world. Cambodia on Wednesday deported 25 Japanese nationals suspected of involvement in online scams to Japan. All the Japanese nationals were arrested in the middle of September. As per a Cambodian police spokesperson, they were in immigration police custody until their deportation and would be sent to Japan via Malaysia. Heavy smog blanketed the streets of Pakistan's Lahore on Wednesday, with air quality index falling to hazardous levels, forcing authorities to shut down schools and markets for the week in the country's most populous province. Cleanup operations were underway on Wednesday after an unseasonal cold weather and blizzard wreaked havoc in several cities of northeastern China. Traffic on several expressways remained disrupted, with tolls shut down because of the sudden snowfall. Australians were left without an internet connection on Wednesday after the country's second-largest telecommunications provider experienced an unexplained nationwide outage. While some services were gradually restored, businesses suffered losses as the outage crippled payment systems throughout the day. After attending the G7 meeting in Tokyo, U.S. Foreign Minister Antony Blinken is visiting South Korea amid concerns over deepening military ties between Russia and North Korea. It's his first visit to South Korea since Yoon Suk-yeol became the country's president last year. DD India's Andrew Wood reports from Hong Kong.
The United States, Japan and South Korea have already condemned North Korea for supplying arms and ammunition to Russia for use in Ukraine. South Korea itself is actually quite a big producer and exporter of armaments. So far, Seoul says that it doesn't want to supply arms to countries that are at war. So this might be an area where Mr. Blinken might want to try to change the Seoul's president's, the South Korean's president's mind. Because after all, more armaments for Ukraine would probably help the country to fight back against Russia. There's also the perennial issue of North Korea. Back in August, Mr. Blinken said that if Beijing did not help to try to denuclearize North Korea, then America would have to strengthen its alliance with Japan and South Korea. And it certainly seems to be doing that. It's done that over the past month or so. There's much more cooperation between these two US allies in, well, virtually in sharing information about North Korea and also about the possible threats from China as well. So this also might be some maneuvering as well before the big meeting next week that's expected between President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden in San Francisco on the sidelines of the APEC Forum for Pacific Rim countries in San Francisco. In Hong Kong, I'm Andrew Wood, reporting for DD India.
U.S. voters have chosen governors in Kentucky and Mississippi. Democratic Governor Andy Beshear, who wants to expand healthcare access, has won the re-election in Kentucky. In Mississippi, Republican Governor Tate Reeves has won his bid for re-election against Democrat Brandon Presley. In Virginia, Democrats won control of both legislative chambers. In the state of Ohio, voters approved a constitutional amendment guaranteeing abortion rights, which means the state's proposed ban on abortions after about 6 weeks cannot go into effect. Five Republican presidential candidates will face each other on Wednesday in the party's third primary televised debate. Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, Chris Christie and Tim Scott have all qualified to appear, but the current frontrunner in the race, Donald Trump, has once again chosen not to take part. DD India's Kate Fisher reports from Washington, D.C.
Two of the five candidates who've made it to the debate stage in Miami are Indian American. But former US Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, and businessman Vivek Ramaswamy are still lower in the polls compared with frontrunner Donald Trump, and still behind his closest competitor, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. With GOP primary voting starting in January, so only a couple of months away, Trump's rivals are hanging on to viability by a thread. But the stakes at Wednesday's debate are particularly high for Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, who are in a cage match for second place behind Trump in Iowa, which is the first state to vote. Haley has enjoyed a significant, though not huge, burst of support in recent polling, in part thanks to previous debate performances. But another Indian American and her rival, Vivek Ramaswamy, is close behind her. His performance in the first debate saw him increase in the polls. DeSantis has struggled to maintain his early positioning as the major Republican alternative to Donald Trump, and he'll be trying to reignite that initial excitement. But the former president, who remains the frontrunner in the Republican primary, is skipping the debate, which is taking place less than 110 kilometers from his residence at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Instead, he'll headline a rally in South Florida as counter-programming. He also missed the first two debates. Kate Fisher in Washington reporting for DD India.
And still to come on DD India Live. Defense and foreign ministers of India and the US to hold talks in New Delhi this week. A climate scientist warns that 2023 is set to be the warmest year on record. And an implant designed in Switzerland offers hope to people suffering from Parkinson's disease. Watching DD India Live, I am Ramesh Ramachandran. Going back to the top story, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Sarah Coates joins us from Tel Aviv. Sarah, Israel has encircled the Gaza city. The Israeli military's air and ground offensive are targeting the Hamas's tunnel network. So will it be a fight to the finish?
Hi there, Ramesh. Well, look, we've just heard from the Israeli military. It says it is now deep inside the heart of Gaza City. It says it is achieving things that it never thought would be possible. We do know that the IDF, this is according to its spokesperson, is now targeting all of this tunnel infrastructure, these hundreds of kilometres of tunnels which run right underneath the coastal enclave. It also just came out a few hours ago to say that it has killed the senior weapons commander. His name is Mohsen Abu Zina. He is reportedly the person that is responsible for firing all of these rockets, these thousands upon thousands of rockets which have been launched into Israeli territory. Now, the military also says it has surrounded the underground bunker of Yahya Sinwar. He is the leader of Hamas inside the Gaza Strip, the Gaza leader in there. And look, if indeed they do kill Sinwar or do capture Sinwar, it would have massive reverberations right around the Middle East and would likely provoke some sort of heavy reaction from Hezbollah on Israel's northern border. Now, this is an area that is extremely tense. Just over the last few minutes, we did hear an update from that border that anti-tank missiles are now being launched over from southern Lebanon into Israeli territory. So we can expect some sort of a response there from the military.
Also, Sarah, Netanyahu says Israel will take on the security responsibility of Gaza for an indefinite period. Now, this despite the US President Joe Biden asking Israel not to occupy the enclave and commit the same mistakes that the US did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Where are things headed?
Well, look, that remains to be seen, given the focus right now is the war that is being waged inside the Gaza Strip. Of course, There has been quite a lot of talk of what Gaza would look like post-Hamas, and a lot of discussions are being had right now. We just did hear from the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken making a public address after the G7 there in Japan. He said that it is clear that Israel cannot occupy Gaza. He said the reality, though, is there may be some sort of a transitional period. We're talking here about when if Hamas is defeated in the Gaza Strip. But he said the only way to durable peace, and this is a key line there from Blinken, the only way to durable peace and security is no forcible displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. And look, this was really a worry. This is what we heard also from Egypt at the beginning of this war. It was very reluctant to open the Rafah crossing, open its borders to these aid trucks going in, and also to the injured people going out, for fear that there would be a mass exodus of Palestinians into Egypt. So look, it certainly seems as though the US is sternly against what Netanyahu said there, and of course Israel will have to take note, given that the US is its closest ally and has been providing it with whatever it needs for this war.
Sarah, thank you for now. Appreciate it. All right, moving on. In other news, India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar will host their US counterparts Lloyd Austin and Antony Blinken for the 5th India-US 2+2 ministerial dialogue in New Delhi on 10th November. Now, this dialogue will enable a high-level review of progress in various aspects of defense and security cooperation. The ministers will work on advancing the future roadmap for the India-US partnership. The meeting will also address regional matters and emphasize shared priorities for expanding collaborations. The Indian ministers will hold separate meetings with their US counterparts, underscoring the continuity of the ministerial dialogue and reaffirming the India-US ties. World leaders and heads of international organizations are gathering in the French capital this week for the 6th edition of the Paris Peace Forum. Now, it comes against a challenging backdrop of geopolitical tensions, which makes collective action all the more urgent. In the run-up to the main dialogue, which begins on Friday, the first World Summit on Glaciers and Poles is currently being held in the city. A climate scientist warns that 2023 is set to be the warmest year on record because of unprecedented temperature irregularities. Samantha Burgess of the Copernicus Climate Change Service says that October this year was identified as the warmest October globally, with an average surface temperature of 15.3 degrees Celsius. Now, Copernicus is the European Union's Earth observation program looking at the Earth and its environment. Burgess says that the Earth has not witnessed such high temperatures in more than 100,000 years. The warning comes ahead of the COP28 summit in the United Arab Emirates.
Climate change driven. And when we look at the data, we can say that the extra heat in the Earth system comes from a range of different locations. So if we look at different latitudinal bands of the planet, then we can say that there's, in October, extra heat coming from the Northern Hemisphere land.
India's President Draupadi Murmu addressed the 11th convocation of the Hemwati Nandan Bahuguna Garhwal University at Srinagar in the northern Indian state of Uttarakhand on Wednesday. President Murmu said that the theme of the convocation, Empowered Women, Prosperous Nation, reflects the progressive thinking of the university.
ये दिलचस्प तथ्य है कि इस विश्वविद्यालय की स्थापना में जन आंदोलन की प्रमुख भूमिका थी। 70 के दशक में शिक्षा के लिए आंदोलन करना यहाँ की विकसित जनचेतना का प्रतीक है। मुझे खुशी है कि वर्ष 1973 में स्थापित इस विश्वविद्यालय ने समय के साथ अपने आप को ढाला है। आज जब हम वीमेन लीड डेवलपमेंट की दिशा में आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, तब इस दीक्षांत समारोह की विषय वस्तु सशक्त महिला समृद्ध राष्ट्र हेमावती नंदन बहुगुणा विश्वविद्यालय की प्रगतिशील सोच को परिलक्षित करती है.
President Murmu visited the Badrinath shrine earlier in the day and wished for the unity, integrity and prosperity of the country. Uttarakhand's Governor Lieutenant General Gurmeet Singh and Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami were present on the occasion. A Switzerland-designed implant has revolutionized the treatment of Parkinson's disease, offering hope to millions of people suffering from the medical condition. Take a look.
A breakthrough in the treatment of Parkinson's disease has been achieved by a Swiss-designed implant. 63-year-old Marc Gauthier, who has been suffering from the degenerative neurological disease for a long time, was the first person to receive the implant, which dramatically improved his ability to walk.
2 years ago, almost to the day, I got a stimulator implanted by Jocelyn, and it changed my life. Because now, I am independent. As you can see, I can walk. I'm still struggling to talk, but that's something else. It changed my life, because now I can leave my home, run errands. I even go on foot to exercise.
The neuroprosthetic, which consists of an electrode field and an electrical impulse generator, simulates his spinal cord to activate his leg muscle. The device has been found to reproduce the way Gauthier would naturally walk.
For the past 20 years, we have been developing technology for precise stimulation of the spinal cord with the objective to restore walking after paralysis due to spinal cord injury. And we thought we could leverage this technology and concept to improve gait deficits that are due to Parkinson's disease.
Global estimates showed that more than 8.5 million people suffered from the disease in 2019. And the technology offers hope for the majority of advanced Parkinson's patients who suffer from mobility issues. The device is expected to be commercialized for use in other diseases by 2026.
Once I only need to be really on top.
And now to news from the world of sport. Indian opener Shubman Gill becomes the world's top-ranked batsman in the ICC ODI rankings, replacing Pakistan skipper Babar Azam. Gill is at #1 position, followed by Babar Azam and Quinton de Kock. Gill has been on a dream run this year. He was behind Babar in the ODI rankings this year. The Indian batter finally overtook Azam for the first time in his career. Gill has scored 1,449 runs in 2023 at an average of 63 and a strike rate of 103.72. Meanwhile, Mohammad Siraj of India has become the world's #1 ranked ODI bowler after his performances in the ongoing Cricket World Cup. Siraj leads the pack, followed closely by Keshav Maharaj and Adam Zampa. And that's all for this edition of DD India Live. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.